I've lived in this town all my life. I know all the weird traditions that come with living in a place as remote as mine. But nothing explains what happens at our deer park. I used to come out here most evenings during the pandemic, park up by the base of the hill overlooking the sanctuary, and just immerse myself in nature. I was always mindful of the distance I had to keep from the deer, particularly during mating season, and it wasn't like the deer didn't know what a car was. These were in their own reserve. Sure, but the trail cut right through their vast fields, and they'd grown accustomed to seeing cars all manner of times in the day and evening, which is what makes the situation all the more unsettling. Starting last week, a sign was put up on the entrance gate to the park, impossible to miss as the car slowed and the tires rolled over the metal grates. With it being the late hours and very few cars on the road, I decided to stop and read it in full, a polite notice to our valued visitors entering the Oboro Nature Reserve. Our deer are exhibiting unusual behaviors, and we are politely requesting you observe the following guidelines in place as to best protect yourself and the well-being of our deer. While the park is open 24 hours a day, we are recommending visitors do not stop their cars during observable grazing periods and on midsummer nights. You are welcome to drive through and observe from a distance, but please do not slow down or stop. Should you be slowed or stopped at any other time and the deer be curious by your vehicle, act calmly and do not speed up. Let them inspect you and judge you as a safe passerby. If they begin snorting, that is your cue to leave. There have been reports of deer standing on their hind legs and remaining idle in the fields. These rumors are a fallacy. Please do not pay any attention to them. There is a black stag that holds dominion over the western herd. His antlers are sharp and his stride is impressive, but do not attempt to approach him. Please pay him the respect you would normally and do not stare at any of the females in his harem. He will charge you. Bucks are not friendly. Deer remember faces. They can recognize you from a distance and will verify your smell as you get closer, listening intently the entire time. There are many of them and only one of you. You would do well to mind that. Lastly, no matter what salacious rumors have been propagating amongst the community, the deer are not congregating in the dead of night. Deer are social animals that sleep and graze together in a herd. This is normal. The deer are acting normally. Drive safely. Keep your doors locked and have a lovely drive in the Oboro Nature Reserve. Strange, right? The notice wasn't your usual steel sign with carefully embossed wording. Rather, it had been hastily marked up and nailed to the wall adjacent to the welcome sign as if in a hurry. I'd not heard any sorts of rumors around town and nobody had complained about the deer park. We're a population of maybe 2,000, so it's not hard for word to get about. Still, I had my routine and intended to stick to it. Some of the info was valuable for newcomers. There was indeed a large black buck who paraded the western herd. His name was Jojo, and I fully believed he would gore anyone who outstayed their welcome or got too close. A beautiful specimen of muscle and authority, he ensured his harem never strayed too far and seemed to be borderline obsessive about making sure they never went across to the eastern side where the large swathes of trees sat. In fact, I'd observed him on a couple of occasions actively nudging or ramming younger males away from the split in the road and back to safety. On the rare occasion that a member of the herd crossed the line, he would refuse to acknowledge them and actively keep them away from entering, as if they were banished. As I drove through the archway, I realized I'd not seen many deer in the eastern section of the park. Looking out my window and staring as the makeshift forest to my right, and a burning question coming to the forefront of my mind that didn't leave as I reached the hill overlooking both sides of the hill. Where are the rest of the deer? It was unnerving to sit there and try to enact my ritual of riding under the clear night when there was a strict absence of the herd where they should be. I tried to focus, but something was pulling my eyes back to looking at that spot time and time again. Eventually, I decided that I needed to get some fresh air and take a better look, satiate my curiosity, and then, with my mind at ease, I can get back to finishing my blog. The air is humid when I step outside. No breeze and the stars are out on full display. Thank goodness for no light pollution in the countryside. I leave the engine running and walk to the barrier my car is parked in front of. Leaning over and taking a pair of binoculars I bring for slower days when I want to see the deer in better detail. As I direct my vision to the eastern herd, I see something darting in the tree line. It's quick, hairy, and seemed to move the second my binoculars motioned towards it. Even a deer shouldn't be that spooked, especially from this distance. My joint seize up and I damn near drop the binoculars when I hear a familiar snorting from behind me. I turn and see Jojo standing 15 feet from me, just by the rear of my car, and his eyes gleaming in my rear lights. His head is low and his antlers are thick, sharp, and aimed at me. In that moment, I don't know if he's going to charge and whether I should be fighting for my damn life. Instead, I do as I was instructed and stay still, not making sudden movements as he snorts again, closing the gap between us slowly. As he gets within 5 feet of me, he rears his head up. I see the most baffling expression on his face for a fleeting moment. Fear. Something ripples through the eastern forest and birds begin flying away in droves. Some of the deer herd in the western area are circling something, and Jojo immediately bounds down and out of sight to control the chaos. I waste no time getting in my car and driving down after them, keeping the doors locked, the window open a crack and my speed at a decent crawl. As I come along the embankment that connects to the road, I see Jojo running full sprint towards another deer. He knocks the rival over and contorts the body as it skids across the grass and falls into the trail just ahead of my car. I know I'm not supposed to, but I stop the car and wait. In a choice between breaking the rules and breaking my car, I'll choose the former any day. The western herd deer under Jojo's command are gathering behind him, making horrific shrieks of terror. Jojo strides up and bows his head again in front of the still contorted deer, antlers on full display and dripping with black blood. It was a clear threat. Do not come back here if you value your life. I started wondering how I'd safely get this deer out of the way, or if I could mount the grass on the other side and go around it, when I saw something horrific unfold in front of me. The body twisted itself around and the limbs snapped to reset themselves. The head still cracked at an ugly angle, bones sticking out of the sides as it got onto shaking legs. When it screamed, it sounded as if its lungs were filled with blood, a horrible muted cry of anguish that backed up every other deer but Jojo. I don't know what was keeping this fucking thing standing, but it let its head flop lazily around as it carefully backed away onto the eastern side of the reserve, before bounding into the tree line as if nothing were wrong. My rational mind chalked it up to adrenaline and the instinct to survive, but it was impossible to shake the feeling that something was wrong. I carried on driving as soon as the deer was out of sight, not looking at Jojo or the others as I carried on down the trail. For the remaining few minutes, I felt unseen eyes staring intently at me until I crossed the threshold and back into civilization. I'd never been more grateful to see other humans, or my bed. Something about the whole incident just took it out of me. As I slept that night, I dreamed I was a deer alongside Jojo, frolicking in the herd and grazing peacefully. But as I cast my eyes upwards to the sky, a bitter chill on the wind, I saw the moon bathed in an almost purple plume, a strange light cast onto the land and noises rustling from the woods opposite. I don't know how I knew this, but something in me instinctively knew we weren't supposed to go there. I saw shapes begin to emerge from the trees and that same horrible shriek ring out as I woke up in a sweat. I leaned forward to catch my breath and grab a glass of water. As I changed positions to reach for my nightstand, I swear I heard the sound of something running up the trail to my house. I was probably still half asleep, but that didn't make it any more damn unnerving. I decided it would be best to drive out the next night and confront my concerns head on. If I'm not going to sleep soundly, then I should use my time wisely and document what I'm seeing. Maybe pass it to the rangers in the morning, right? When I drove back out there last night, the atmosphere was vastly different. A mist was enshrouding the trail, and the majority of the deer on the western side huddled together, shaking and staring intently at the other side of the nature reserve. I couldn't see Jojo anywhere. Strange, I thought. Alpha males patrol their herds dutifully. Why wasn't he there? I parked up at my usual spot and making sure he wasn't around, I pulled out my binoculars again and stared at the eastern area. The clouds beginning to part as the moon shone through. There was movement all along the tree line as shapes began emerging one by one. I think it took my mind a moment to process what I was seeing. I'd finally seen the deer on the eastern side, but they were wrong. Very, very wrong. Standing on their hind legs and taking confident, awkward steps, they marched out of the trees with their heads craned to the sky, all of them emitting that horrible sound like their heads were being held underwater as they screamed. It reverberated in my ears and made my skin break out in goosebumps. There were dozens of them, maybe a couple of hundred. Some were dragging a structure out with them, others hauling a writhing shape I couldn't quite see. They congregated in a small huddle, the center of which was obscured from my vision. I looked over to Jojo's herd and saw the fear in their eyes, so many of them shaking and their teeth bared. A primal fear we humans have largely lost in the safety of being the dominant species. But this night showed me we're not as powerful as we think we are. As the huddle broke away and began walking again towards the edge of their field, I saw what they'd been huddled around. Jojo. He was still alive, but barely moving and breathing heavily, his eyes glazed over. When he began to come to, he started shrieking like a fawn. It was unnerving. They dragged him to the structure. A primitive set of steps with a hollowed-out hole in its center, coated in a thick substance on the sides, just large enough for Jojo to be thrown into. I watched these things. These not deer use their front hooves to hoist him up and into the hole, his screaming incessant the entire time. They stood around it, their necks cracked as they stared at the moon and shrieked. I looked up with them, wondering if what they sought was up there in the skies. A kind of primitive god for these creatures? I should have known better, of course, whatever god these not deer prayed to. It didn't reside up above. No, it lurked deep below. A low groan called out in response. It possessed the same blood-filled lungs these monstrosities had, and Jojo's deer huddled closer together at its roar. Jojo had stopped moving, his crying completely gone as the not deer too fell silent and formed a circle around their altar, snorting in unison. It grew to a fever pitch before something began dragging Jojo from beneath, ripping at his limbs and pulling until a horrific squelch indicated the top had separated from the bottom. The hole spurted out blood and chunks of deer as the not deer celebrated, danced in the rain and feasted on the pieces. One final roar rang out from the unseen creature. It shook the ground, and I felt my balance waver for just a moment, steadying myself on the car. I know I should have booked it out of there, but I was desperate to understand what I was seeing, rationalizing that perhaps this was a bizarre art piece, maybe a protest from an animal rights group or even a bunch of edgy satanic teens. But that rational voice in my head grew very, very quiet when I grabbed my binoculars to look again. Every single one of them was staring up at me. Emotionless, black eyes fixated on my position. I didn't wait any longer. I drove out of there at a breakneck pace, not looking at either side of the park on my exit, and damn near coming off the road with the lack of traction. As I got to the archway, my tires smashing against the grate, I'd inadvertently attracted the forest ranger on duty. He pulled me over and walked up to my window, a friendly smile on his face. "You know there's a speed limit there for a reason, right, son?" Yeah, I'm sorry. I got a little spooked is all." I smiled back, nerves shot to hell. He raised an eyebrow. "You didn't break one of our rules now, did you?" "Oh no, I kept to them, it's just, well..." Jojo got attacked by the eastern deer and I don't think he's doing well. It was just a shock to take in. I figured telling a half-truth would be best. Couldn't exactly say what I thought I'd really seen now, could I? That's so. Well, they make their choices carefully. We don't know much, but we do know not to interfere. This is how it's always been. Animals have strange practices, you get how it is. But so long as they didn't look at you, you're fine. Deer remember faces, after all. Thanks for visiting. Drive safe." He smiled again and tipped his hat before walking off to his station. My blood ran cold and I couldn't get those words out of my head on the entire drive home. But, so long as they didn't look at you, you're fine. I've not stepped outside my house since last night. I live in a remote part of the village, and while I enjoy the privacy, it's been a hotbed for strange noises and unsettling emotions. Everywhere I go in my home, I feel like I'm being watched by those same vacant eyes. What happens now? What happens to those they look at? I can't get their eyes out of my head, and I can't sleep worth a damn either. This isn't going to end until I figure out what they want. I wish I had more for you. I wish I could tell you what the not deer were, what they prayed to, why they sacrificed, what the ranger knew. But there's so many unknowables that it makes my head spin. It's just like being deep in the woods. So many twists and turns, you never know which is the right path to take, and what danger lurks behind every tree. I don't know what the deer are doing. I don't know what is going on at that park. But if you value your life, you'll stay far, far away from it. I'm a journalist that mainly does work between South Carolina and North Carolina. Originally from South Carolina, I preferred the North Carolina scenery and people. For my work, I normally write about normal, everyday things. weather, obituaries, even about cats stuck in trees. I loved my job, I loved writing, it was my passion. Then again, there are stories some people don't want to write about. I was in the southern part of North Carolina one day, getting information about a law firm that was shutting down. Supposedly they represented a businessman that got caught trying to illegally sell protected land in the mountains. The firm lost, of course, and the man went to jail. All I was trying to do was get some kind of story out of it. The other news sites had gotten there earlier than me, beating me to the fresher story. I got nothing but the scraps. The law firm didn't give me much, they were more annoyed by me showing up. Figured since hundreds of other reporters or journalists came asking the same questions, I was willing to give up at that point, deciding to put something about a hero cop in the paper. I went to a local cafe and sat by the large windows. I looked over my notes as I waited for my coffee. Nothing was adding up about the law firm, from the little bit of notes I had. I flipped a page in my notebook and stopped. There in my handwriting was DuPont State Park. Weird, I thought. I tried racking my brain to try and remember why I wrote that down. When I was trying to remember, someone sat down across from me. I quickly looked up, knowing I wasn't meeting anyone. The person that sat across from me had a sweatshirt on, with the hood up. Weird, I thought. They looked over their shoulder before speaking. "I know what you're looking for," they said. I was about to object, saying I knew nothing they were talking about. "Don't think I already know what you're doing. You're digging yourself a hole you can't climb out of." The stranger spoke, reaching into their bag and pulling out a manila folder. There were several papers inside. Sliding the folder to me, the stranger went and stood. They turned back to me, saying, "Do your job and do it right. Just don't get yourself killed." Get myself killed? What were they talking about? With that, they left me there, staring at a folder I didn't want to open. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened the folder after leaving the cafe. I sat in my car, the engine not yet on. The first page in the folder had whole paragraphs written on it, so did some of the others. But they seemed more like government documents rather than a regular typed paragraph a college student would write. Several words were redacted. Odd, I thought, flipping through the other pages. I stopped after finding a newspaper clipping from a few months ago. It was about a man who was admitted to a mental hospital saying he was being stalked by some creature of some kind. A shiver ran down my spine. I heard about this. It didn't make big headlines, though. Not many mental illness cases actually do. But why was this in there? I continued reading. It said the man was involved in a motorcycle crash on the parkway in the Brevard area. He said a white creature had attacked him, but the driver that came upon the wreck said they didn't see anyone else. Later, at the hospital, the man had an episode when he believed he saw the creature again in the parking lot. The doctors at the hospital decided to send him to a mental ward after that. What was going on? First me digging into a failing law firm, and now this about a mentally sick man thinking he saw a creature in the woods. Was all of this connected? I had to know more about this and went back to the redacted documents. There was one paragraph that talked about DuPont State Park. It said there was a facility up there, along with park rangers that were undercover to make sure no one found it. Strangely enough, there was something in the document talking about how the facility housed nuclear weapons, experiments, test subjects, among other things. I finally realized how big this was. I had unknowingly stumbled upon a bigger story than I bargained for. Without giving it a second thought, I drove to DuPont State Park, hoping to find answers. It wasn't a great idea to go hiking in a button-up shirt and dress shoes, I know. But you have to understand that I needed answers. I made my way down the gravel road that most hikers walk on. Other passerby gave me strange glances when I passed. Why would someone hide something up here if there are so many people visiting this place? As I made my way up a hill, I spotted a fork in the road. The gravel road going to the left had a gate with a lock on it. As I made my way towards it, I looked around, seeing no one around me. I quickly climbed the gate and hurried down the road so no one could see me. The road I walked down was eerily dark, the trees blocking out the afternoon sun. Continuing on my way, the gravel turned into an actual paved road, enough for 2 vehicles. My day was getting weirder and weirder. As I ventured further and further down the road, I heard a hum of an electrical current to my right. I couldn't see any electrical poles or lines to trace back to where the electrical hum was. Could it be underground? I stood there trying to figure out where it came from. What I didn't notice was the sound of an ATV driving down the road. It was too late for me to hide when the side-by-side came upon me. The person driving stopped the vehicle a few feet from me, They stepped out and I got a better look at them. It was a tall man, dark hair and dark skin. He was dressed in park ranger attire. My eyes flicked down to his waist. A gun flashed at his hip. Why would a park ranger have a gun? Heart thumping, I tried not to act scared of him. I knew who he was really working for. You do know this is a restricted area, right? He spoke, hands landing on his hips. I shook my head, licking my lip. Sorry, I didn't see a sign saying that. I was looking for new places to hike. I looked him in the eye, his expression turning devilish. You're hiking in slacks and a button-up shirt? He asked, knowing he caught me in a lie. I cursed at myself. Yeah. I like to wind down after a day at work by hiking. I gave him a fake smile. The ranger raised an eyebrow and then jabbed his thumb at the side-by-side. Get in. The ranger drove me all the way back to my car, the whole ride silent. I stepped off onto the ground, grabbing my keys and ready to drive away. As I went to my car, the ranger spoke up. Take the other, more safer path. That way you don't get yourself killed. I turned, seeing his expressionless face as he drove away. What have I gotten myself into? Hi again. I've now been in the park for about 21 hours. I thought I might tell you more about me and more on the park. Let's start with more on me. I'm 26 and I am married. I have been married for about 3 years now, and I am hoping we can get to 4. Now about the park, the owner is a 60, 70-year-old man. He's claimed to own the park since he was my age, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was longer. The park itself is not that large, having only 3 roller coasters, not counting the unfinished one. The water park portion isn't too big either, with only 2 big water slides, a lazy river, and a kids area. The biggest point in the park is the main area. It is full of games and other small things. I remember when I was younger, I loved one of the roller coasters. I think it's called the Dead Sound. I'm still not sure why it was called that, but it was certainly fun. I think that's enough for now. I'll keep up with the logs for now. Our 8-eye decided to try and call the owner again. Didn't work, neither did calling my wife. I think I'm going to try and start the generators up. Hopefully I can get the phone lines working. Our 9-eye've tried the generators for a while now. Seems they're fucking busted. Not surprised, guess I'm going to have to wait. I'm going to see if the office has any keys to the gate. I hope they do at least. Our 10-eye just realized how long I've been here. There's no sun, it's just stars. Nothing but the stars in my flashlight. Something has to be happening. I looked through the main office. There's no keys other than to the rides. Not even a pair of gate keys. I need to find out what is going on. Our 11-eye took some of the ride keys. I'm going to test if the rides work. I might be wrong on the generators. I'm going to the Dead Sound. Hopefully it works. It's the closest ride to the generators. If it runs, it has to have a separate generator. Our 12, the coaster didn't work. I have no idea what to do. I might go see if there's a back entrance. It might be in the camping area. At this point, I just want to leave. Hour 14, the last 2 hours have been very uneventful. I've just been walking through the woods. I found a fence which was just as tall as the rest. The entire park is enclosed. I need a way out of here. I need to see my wife. I need to get to her. Hour 15, I don't get it. All of the roller coasters are on. I don't know how or why, but all of the roller coasters are on. They all keep going. I'm going to try and turn them off. Hour 15, 1, 2, they won't shut off. They keep going even when I use the emergency shutdown switches. They won't stop. I need to figure out who's here and what they're doing. Hour 16, they stopped. I'm freaking out. I'm going to check on the restricted areas if I'm going crazy. I don't want to lose my job over it. I've got to get to work on escaping. I got to get out. Astra respicere pulcra ut amici tu videbis. 8 years ago, I went camping in the Everglades. I wasn't trying to have some adventure or escape reality in a romantic way. It was more practical than that. I had been dealing with chronic back pain for years, and at that point, sleeping in a normal tent on the ground was basically impossible. If I lay flat for too long, it felt like my spine was being pressed into stone. So I improvised. I used my old convertible. I folded the front seats down, cleared out the back, and turned it into a makeshift bed. Not comfortable, not safe, not ideal, but it worked better than anything else I had. What I didn't mention to myself at the time was how exposed that actually made me. A fabric roof, thin walls, zero real protection, and I chose to take it deep into the Florida Everglades. Most people think of Florida as beaches and sunshine. The Everglades are something else entirely. Endless wetlands, stagnant water, thick humidity that clings to your skin, and roads that disappear into nothingness. Even during the day, it feels like the world is holding its breath. At night, it feels like the world has stopped caring whether you're there or not. I arrived just before sunset and parked in a remote campsite. There were only two other vehicles, an old RV that looked permanently abandoned and a muddy pickup truck parked crooked under the trees. No people outside. No movement, no sound except insects in distant water. The air smelled like wet soil and decay. I remember standing outside my car watching the sky turn orange through the tree line, stretching my back and trying to ignore the sharp, familiar pain in my spine. Then the noises in the swamp started. Something splashed far out in the dark water, probably an alligator. I told myself that enough times until I believed it. Set up my sleeping space in the convertible, reclined the seat, laid down a blanket and positioned a small pillow under my lower back. The air was warm even though it was December, so I left the windows slightly open. Everything felt almost peaceful until midnight. That's when I first heard the footsteps on the roof. Light scratching at first, small, quick movements across the fabric ceiling above me. I exhaled sharply. Raccoon, I muttered. They were common here, annoying but harmless. But this one didn't sound normal, it was heavier than expected. The roof dipped slightly with each step, like something with more weight than a small animal was moving across it. I pushed upward from inside to scare it off. The footsteps stopped. For about a minute. Then they came back. Scratch. Scratch, scratch. It repeated over and over again. Every time I pushed upward, it would leave, then return, almost like it was testing me, playing with the fact that I couldn't get out easily. After a while, it stopped completely. Silence returned and I finally started to relax. I closed my eyes. That's when I heard breathing, right next to me. My eyes opened instantly. At first, my brain couldn't process what I was seeing. The interior of the car was dim, lit only by faint moonlight passing through the windshield. Something was sitting in the driver's seat. A raccoon, perfectly still, staring directly at me over the backrest, not moving, not blinking, just watching. For a moment, I honestly forgot to breathe. It didn't behave like an animal that had accidentally wandered in. It looked intentional, like it had chosen that spot. Then it tilted its head slightly, slowly climbed onto the center console. That was enough. I shoved the door open, and it bolted out into the darkness. After that, sleep was impossible. Every sound outside the car felt amplified. Every rustle in the grass sounded closer than it should have. Eventually, I gave up and went to the campground bathroom. The walk was short, maybe 2 minutes, but at night it felt much longer. The Everglades don't get quiet after dark. Frogs, insects, water shifting in the marsh. It all blends into a constant living noise, but something felt off. The campground seemed empty, not just quiet, empty. The RV was dark. The pickup truck was gone from human presence entirely. No movement anywhere. I didn't stay long in the bathroom, I went straight back. Halfway there, I heard rustling behind me. I stopped. The sound stopped too. I turned. Nothing there. Just trees and darkness. I walked faster. When I got back to my car, everything seemed normal again. I locked the doors and eventually managed to fall asleep despite the occasional noises outside. Morning came heavy and bright. My back hurt worse than usual, but that wasn't what caught my attention. A crumpled plastic bread bag was lying under a tree near my campsite, empty. Stared at it for a few seconds before I understood what had happened. The loaf of high-fiber bread I had stored in the back compartment of my convertible roof space was gone. The raccoon had gotten into my car while I was gone and stolen it. I should have been annoyed. Instead, I found myself impressed. 18 slices high-fiber bread, about 126 grams of fiber in one sitting. Stood there imagining what kind of internal chaos was happening, somewhere deep in the swamp. For the first time since the night before, I actually felt a little sympathy for the creature, at least, until I saw the footprints they led away from the bread, back into the swamp. At first I assumed they were just more animal tracks. But then I noticed something wrong. They were too long, too narrow. And they didn't look like they belonged to a raccoon at all. They looked human, but not quite. Stood there longer than I should have, staring at the tracks. At first, I tried to rationalize them. Boots. Maybe someone from another campsite. Maybe a ranger doing a night check. Maybe I just misjudged the shape in the mud. But none of those explanations held up. The prints were too clean in some places and too broken in others, like whoever made them wasn't walking normally. The spacing was uneven, not a natural stride. More like hesitation or learning. And then there was the direction. They didn't come from the campsite. They led toward it, which meant whatever had made them hadn't been following the raccoon. It had been following me. I felt a strange tightness in my chest, the kind that has nothing to do with fear at first, just confusion trying to become fear. I looked back toward my car. The campsite was still. Too still. The kind of stillness that makes you notice how loud your own breathing is. The bread bag under the tree shifted slightly in the wind. At least, I told myself it was the wind. Then, I noticed something else. The tracks didn't just stop at the tree. They circled it multiple times, like whoever made them had stood there for a while, waiting, watching, deciding. I took a step back without thinking. My foot landed in something soft. Another print, fresh right, behind me. I froze. For a few seconds I didn't move at all, not even my head. I was too afraid that any motion would confirm what my body already knew. Slowly, I turned, nothing, just the edge of the swamp, the trees, and the thin strip of morning fog curling low over the ground. But the air felt different now. Heavier. Like the space behind me was no longer empty, even if my eyes insisted it was. I walked fast back toward my car, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. That lack of sleep, stress, and back pain were messing with my perception. But then I saw it. On the side of the convertible roof, a small indentation in the fabric, not from weight, from pressure, like something had pressed down from above, and stayed there long enough to leave a mark. I stopped beside the car and looked up slowly. The roof was still. No movement, no sound. For a moment, I almost relaxed again. Almost. Then I noticed the faintest detail. The fabric wasn't just dented, it was slightly stretched inward, as if something had been sitting there. From the inside, and hadn't left yet. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the dent in the fabric roof, waiting for it to move, waiting for anything. But the Everglades gave me nothing except wind through the trees and the distant, restless sound of water shifting in the swamp. Eventually, I forced myself to breathe normally again. I told myself it made sense. Fabric stretches. Animals climb cars. Raccoons get into everything. My mind was just filling in gaps because I was tired, stressed and running on almost no sleep. I reached up and pressed the roof from the outside. Nothing. Just the usual resistance of old canvas and worn supports. I exhaled slowly. It was nothing. Just coincidence layered on coincidence. I opened the car door, grabbed the empty bread bag and looked at it again. The rational explanation became easier the more I focused on it. The raccoon got into the compartment, stole the bread, and left. The footprints were probably mine mixed with animal tracks. The shape on the roof was just pressure from repeated climbing. And the presence I felt? Pure exhaustion. Sleep deprivation does that. It turns noise into meaning and shadows into intent. I got into the driver's seat, started the car, and let the engine idle for a moment. The familiar vibration helped ground me. Real world. Real sound. Real machine. I turned the wheel and slowly left the campsite. As I drove out, I looked back once. The RV was still there. The pickup truck still unmoved. The swamp behind everything looked exactly like it had the night before. Silent, indifferent, unchanged. Nothing followed me. Nothing chased me. Nothing was waiting. By the time I reached the main road, the tension in my chest had fully faded. Within an hour, I was already convincing myself the whole experience had been exaggerated in my head. Raccoon in a car, a stolen loaf of bread, weird night in the Everglades. That's all it was. Even the footprints made sense in hindsight. Mud shifts shape easily. And I was never fully awake when I saw them. By the time I got home, I had almost stopped thinking about it entirely. Almost. It wasn't until a few days later that I noticed something that finally closed the loop for me. While cleaning out the back of the convertible, I found a small tear in the fabric roof lining. Nothing dramatic, just a thin, stretched slit near the edge of the rear section. The kind of damage you wouldn't notice unless you were specifically looking for it. I stared at it for a while, then I finally understood what had happened. The raccoon hadn't been unusually heavy. It hadn't been sitting inside the car. It hadn't learned anything strange or followed me. It was just a raccoon, doing what raccoons do, climbing, exploring, pulling, tearing, returning to food sources, and repeating the same behavior until it succeeded. The footprints in the swamp, probably mine mixed with animal tracks and distorted mud after a long night of walking half awake. The presence I felt behind me, simple fear filling in gaps my eyes couldn't explain in the dark, and the indentation on the roof, just weight distributed through old fabric after repeated climbing. Nothing supernatural, nothing unknown, nothing watching, just me, tired and pain, alone in a very large swamp at night, with a very persistent raccoon who really liked bread. I leaned back, closed the trunk, and actually laughed a little, because the truth wasn't that something had been out there with me. It was that the Everglades didn't need anything strange to feel unsettling. It already was.